Welcome back to Native Honor Hours. Cindy, put your glasses on.
I was checking out my look. Leave me alone, old man.
We're back from, just a 1 week hiatus.
We might be going every other week. I have to work next Thursday.
We'll do what we can do. Anyway, we're back, and a lot of things have been happening. A lot of things to talk about today. But one of the first things, there are several big items on, of note. One of them is what's going on with the Indian boarding schools, finding numerous grave sites, various locations, and that's going to be an ongoing issue. I mean, there's a lot of things happening with that.
Did you see what Auntie Deb did?
Yeah, I was going to talk about that, but I kind of want to save that for the end.
Oh, now you're telling me when I can talk about things.
Of course, because you always veer off into, she never keeps.
Kenny, can we mute him? Mute.
I first wanted to start off with the knucklehead. I think I posted that. It was the congressman who voted against the Juneteenth holiday. And
I'm looking his name up.
I think his last name was Norman, or first name Norman. But he voted against it. And one of the things he said was, what next? Native American, we got to do a holiday for Native Americans? I got to thinking, well, of course you could. But I got to thinking, what would we celebrate? Who would we celebrate?
Well, like we were saying, that's hard. My heroes might not necessarily be your heroes.
And the holidays that we do have that I guess natives are sort of tied to, Columbus Day, which celebrates some white guy who came and terrorized, murdered, all that kind of stuff. That's what I don't think you can tie us in with that, although he gets credit for discovering us. And the other one that we're coming up here pretty soon is 4th of July, the Declaration of Independence, and it sort of spells out what the founding fathers thought of our ancestors. When near the end of the Declaration, one of the things that it says that the king had done was stirred up the merciless Indian savages against them. So that I always talk to my class that's what we've been labeled since the founding of this country, is as savages. So I don't know if you want to say.
Well, here's my little news blurb on yours. The congressman's name is Representative Ralph Norman. And this is his quote, "How many holidays do we want?" he asked. "Are we going to do one for the Native American Indians?" Well, the thing is, every day it's our country. People keep acting like we're outsiders in our own country. And we're always the afterthought. Oh God, no. Do we have to give one to the Native, what's he call us? Native American Indians? Do we have to have one? I mean, are we so low in the echelon that that's the lowest thing you can possibly think of? What next? Native Americans? Is that kind of put us on the sphere of recognition?
Can I correct you? But again,
no,
but I will. You said our country. When you think about it, the Supreme Court held that the 14th Amendment did not apply to our ancestors.
I know, in our own country. Or I guess I should say our own land.
See, therefore I'm correcting you.
So what would be better, our own land?
Well, my point is that the Constitution didn't apply to us, and Constitution doesn't apply against tribal governments.
Or women. The Constitution didn't apply to anybody but white male property owners. And
it took an act of Congress. I bet you don't remember what the name of the congressional act was that made us citizens. See, Kenny,
yes, I do. It's there,
American
and
Indian
it's there.
Citizenship Act, 1924.
For some reason, the Reorganization Act was stuck in my mind.
It was pre-IRA. But
Yep.
but getting back to my point is, what if he says, what are we gonna do for Native American Indian holiday? What would that holiday be, and what would we be? And I was thinking, maybe it should be, we're still here. Celebrate that we're still here after the numerous attempts, federal policy attempts to get rid of us. Yeah, we're still.
That would be good pan-Indian, or pan-Native. It would have to be something that would unite us all. In the 60s, it was red power, that united. We need something like that to pan-unite Natives.
I don't know if we'll ever be able to come up with an occasion to celebrate that would unite all of us. I don't know. I don't know of any. Maybe Kenny, you can put that out there as a question. What person and or event would be worthy? Although there's not, I shouldn't say worthy.
Today it would be for us. It would, for the Lakota, it would be June 25th, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. We killed Custer.
No, I thought you guys called it the Battle of Greasy Grass.
Greasy grass, as the Indians say.
I thought you would. Here you are being all colonized, calling it the Battle of the Little Big. It was Greasy Grass.
Well, don't you think that people who are listening would understand that more than Greasy Grass?
Well, then we have to educate them then.
See, and we just did.
I did. You went back to.
I said the way they would understand. I mean, if you say Battle of the Little Bighorn, everybody knows what that is.
No, they don't. They don't. I have students in class that haven't heard of it.
Well, and it's not just a Lakota. It was the Northern Cheyenne and the Arapaho were in it with us.
Yeah, there are several tribes involved, but predominantly, I think it was your ancestors.
Yeah.
But that's coming up tomorrow, and here.
What is today June 25th or tomorrow? What is the date?
I think today is the 24th.
Is it, Kenny?
She doesn't
believe
tomorrow. Me. It's right here on my computer screen in front of me.
Ever since COVID, I've lost days. I don't know what day it is.
No, you lost it before COVID. You're just
from working with you, from trying to keep you organized, made my brain explode. And this is what we're left to deal with.
So that here in Nebraska, we have Standing Bear Day,
which a school in Lincoln just named themselves Standing Bear. So hey, there you go. A high school, a new one. Where's it going to be at? Do you know?
I don't know. In Lincoln somewhere. That's your old stomping ground. You should know.
I was just there for 5 days, staying with my grandkids.
But I hope, and I said this on Facebook when they were saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to have a high school, Standing Bear High School." And I hope they don't have a native themed mascot. Just please avoid that. Also, one of my tribal ancestors is getting a lot of recognition. Suzanne LaFleche. There's some things going on. So there's a number of.
I heard they're rebuilding or refurbishing her house in
hospital. The
hospital.
But so there's a number of people that we could celebrate, but it's that one person that would unite everybody, and I don't know if that is there. Maybe one day we'll have Anti-Deb Day.
Well, as you taught me, with over 500 nations, how can there be consensus?
That's why I think it'd be difficult. Although, like I said, I think the one thing that would unite us is, hey, we're still here after all the attempts you tried to get rid of us.
How about a Native American president? That would unite us.
All right. Well, so Knucklehead of the Week goes to Congressman Norman, and for voting against Juneteenth and saying, we got to give them Indians one too. Oh, now go ahead.
Did you know about Juneteenth?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I did.
I learned about it about 7
2
years
weeks
ago. They
ago?
had a play. Me and Cassie went to the play.
What I was surprised with is the speed upon which it was approved by, I didn't even know it was, it was being up. Next thing you know, hey, we got Friday off. So I was pleasantly surprised, but you want to know what else is going on that just happened yesterday?
What?
Well, it sort of happened when Congress passed the last round of COVID relief. You know how Congress people, when they get this big bill, they'll put all their little projects in there and get funded. This time we took advantage of it because a provision was put in there to return 18,800 acres of what was disputed. What from the tribes and the court's perspective, it was a tribe's land. It was at what's his name?
Ed, turn down your phone.
I can't. You know why I can't?
You don't know how.
No, because it controls the volume of my hearing aids. So I can't put my phone on silent.
I am so heartbroken you can actually hear now. I used to walk beside you and on your bad side and say what I thought were the funniest things in the world, and you never heard them. So I got away with it. I mocked you greatly.
But if I put it on silence, the little thing, my phone mute, if I put it on mute, then it doesn't allow me to adjust the volume up. So I apologize for that, but it's what allows me to hear better. Anyway, I was getting back to my point of the 18,800 acres that was taken by Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, and it was in Montana. And the tribes obviously they wanted it back, and once the United States government takes something from tribes, it's darn impossible to get it back. Even the court said, yeah, it was an illegal taking, but there was a provision put into that last COVID bill to return that 18,800 acres, which is not, it's federal lands that is being used as a preserve or something like that. But it was returned back to the Kootenai Salish Confederated Tribes up in Montana. That was announced yesterday by the Department of Interior. And who's in charge of the Department of Interior again?
Beautiful Deb Haaland.
Yeah. So
speaking of which, Deb Haaland is going to be on the cover of In Style magazine. I know you probably don't know it, Ed, but that In Style magazine is one of the big ones. It's right up there with Vogue and Cosmo and all the important ones. And she's going to be on the cover. When have you ever seen a Native American on the cover of a magazine? When it wasn't a caricature.
I don't know.
I'm sure Lone Ranger and Tonto made it.
I noticed that was a widely shared picture on Facebook today. So I was made aware of it through that. But that was, that's obviously great recognition for her. But
well, and she sent up a document to Biden to protect barriers. So she's doing a lot. She set up a commission to delve into the boarding schools in the United States. Ed, you should be on that commission.
You know what that is called,
the boarding school class. Task force.
You know what that's called?
Task force.
A segue. Very good. You sort of just fell into that, didn't you? You didn't.
It was your guidance. Oh, great one.
You just walked. You fell into that, not even knowing that. But the other topic I wanted to spend some time on was, obviously what's been going on in Indian country is the boarding school issues and the number of unmarked graves that they are finding throughout Canada. But there's also here in the United States, we're giving a count, 751 a day, 250. It's not going to, I don't think we will ever know what's the true number of fatalities, deaths that occurred in these Indian boarding schools. And for the most part, people don't know what happened. They don't know what boarding school is, what led to it. They have no clue. And this is a thing that we need to be teaching. But
Well, and it's just not in Canada. Here at Carlisle just released the bones of some children to the Sichangu tribe, my tribe, in 2021. We're getting the bones back. So there's a lot that I would suspect it's worse in the United States. In St. Francis, a little area of the cemetery is just little crosses of children who died there. No names, no recognition, just little broken down crosses. It's sad.
I should probably give a little historical backdrop of the boarding schools.
And you know, if I may say, you taught the best class in boarding schools. It's too bad that you're not still teaching it. You really broke it down. I learned everything I learned about the boarding schools from you, and it made me want to learn more.
I want to teach it again, or something close to that. And I'm working on something. But anyway, let me, for those of you that hear boarding school, what the heck boarding school? Well, the historical backdrop to that is that, you know, I mentioned earlier that, you know, we were viewed as savages. When I say that, I mean that quite literally, that we were thought to be subhuman. And the only thing to do with us was to either kill us, sell us, or civilize us. And one of the federal policy directives was, let's try to civilize them. And what the United States government did was, what happened was is that there were churches. And when we say civilized, what they meant was we didn't have a soul. In order to, the process of civilization was to baptize us so that we could receive a soul.
Well, also the military. I mean, the first boarding school, Carlisle, run by Pratt, a military man.
Yes, but churches had a huge role in that. If you let me finish.
In our part of the country, it was the
She's
Jesuits.
not going to let me finish, Kenny.
No, I'm just adding information. In our part of the country, it was the Jesuits.
You're interrupting me.
Why else am I here?
To distract people. But anyway, my point was that the federal government viewed us as less than human. And one of the things that they established was called the Board of Indian Commissioners. And they charged them with trying to figure out, and the Board of Indian Commissioners was a bunch of religious organizations that had been involved in, you know, missions and setting up schools,
Friends of the Indians.
And so the United States government turned this over to the Board of Indian Commissioners and said, figure out a way to civilize them. What they came up with is they said, you know what, these mission schools, they call them, the schools that were essentially day schools, they said, you know what, it's not working because, you know, we bring them to class and send them home, and the old men there are not encouraging them to speak English or do the things that they were taught in school. So they said you needed to have a full immersion into civilized life, which meant three things: that you learned English, that you learned some kind of agricultural trade, and the third part was you got baptized, you got religion.
And how did they teach these kids to only speak English?
How?
I'm giving you a segue here. I'm giving you
it was they were forced. I mean, they
were beaten for speaking their own language.
If they used their own language or if they tried to run away, they were beaten and taken back. And they were early on, and throughout a good portion of this, it was through compulsory means. They would go to the tribes and say, your kids need to come with us. And if you don't, you're not going to get your treaty provisions. And sometimes they would just take them. And what happened was these kids were taken to these boarding schools, and they got a military guy. You mentioned Pratt, Richard Pratt, who essentially was charged with some of the schools that trained former slaves or educated former slaves. And so they essentially turned it over to him and said, here, educate and civilize these Indians. And they used the military style, and because he was a military guy.
And we're talking about 5, 6-year-old kids.
Oh yeah, and sometimes younger. And the whole point, like I said, was and they were to stay there, and on rare occasions they were allowed to leave. And the whole point was they learned those 3 things, and the motto of Pratt was kill the Indian, save the man, something to that effect. And this
exactly those words.
And this model was taken to Canada as well. So they working down south should work up here. So this whole boarding school issue was built on the premise that we were savages and that we needed to be civilized. And the only way to civilize us was to immerse us into language, religion, and essentially the way of life, which was an agrarian style. So that's what the boarding schools did.
Along with beating, raping, murdering, abusing these children. And the ones, my great grandma was in Carlisle, and my grandma and my mom were both in the boarding school system. My grandma still retained a lot of her traditional ways of child rearing, but our mothers were very, very different. They spanked us, and our grandmas never did. You know what I mean? They learned to be white people and how to raise their children that way. A lot of them had shame about being Native. My mom was very conflicted. She never told one story about her time in the boarding school, not one. Those years are a mystery to me for her, but I know it damaged her.
You mentioned that I taught, and I did. And one of the things that I would do with this class, and Kenny was in that class, I would take them to the Genoa Indian boarding school here in Nebraska. And I can tell you that every tribal student that I took with me up to Genoa found a relative there, because they had some records there. And it was amazing to me, and it was an eye-opening experience to me, how the boarding school era it did what it was supposed to do. It immersed, and it affected almost, I don't know if anybody can say, a tribal person could say, well, no, I don't have any relatives that were in boarding school. I'm sure maybe you can find some, but my experience was that every student, tribal student that took that class and went up to Genoa, found a relative that was there.
Well, you know what? And one of the things that really bothered me about Genoa is the people who talk about it whitewash what the boarding school experience was. And you can feel that place. I could not go any more than 3 steps into the barn before I had to just turn around and walk away. I wish that the boarding schools that were still up would at least tell the truth and not try and whitewash it.
See, one of the things that I told my students was that when you look at the impact and the effects of the boarding school era, even today, because, sometimes today, a lot of people are saying, that was in the past. It doesn't have an impact today. I would say to them,
it impacts how we parent. It impacts how we react to life.
That was a point that I would make to my students. When you think about it, I would ask them, how do you learn to be a parent? You don't read a book, you learn it from your parents. and their parents learned it from their parents, and that's how it's through modeling. And you had generations of tribal kids that were raised by nuns, teachers, and what was their form of discipline? They got beat, and even worse. And if that's how you learned how to be a parent. That's how you were raised. The other point that is prevalent today is many tribes, including mine, are having a difficult time retaining our language. And the languages were essentially the law. The analogy I use with my students is that, you know how you do laundry and you do colors and whites and you throw the bleach in and it sort of messes everything up. The colors and will all blend and leaves. To me, the boarding school era was when you poured in the bleach, it took everything, it took it out. And it
broke up the family.
And this was found in the Miriam Commission report afterwards about, you know, the whole assimilation era. And they said, you know what the boarding schools did? It devastated the nuclear family. Well, no kidding. That's what the whole point was.
Well, and then when the kids went home from the boarding school, they didn't fit anymore. And how double hard would that be on those people who were already put through the boarding school where they didn't belong, and then they came home and they didn't fit anymore.
And now we're finding out, I think what most of us that have, you know, studied it and been around it knew what was happening. Let me give you a real quick on, I know we're kind of running out of time, but up in Genoa, Nebraska, they have tried looking for the cemetery. What they think is that sometime in the 1930s, when they had all these public works projects, they had what was called the Loop River Canal that was right north of alongside the Genoa boarding school. So they think that when they put the canal in there, that it wiped out the cemetery. So we may never find any of those bodies that were at the Genoa Indian boarding school. And we might find that as well. So that's how come I'm saying, I don't know if we'll ever know the real number of fatalities that occurred as a result of the boarding school.
Well, because do you think they kept any of those records?
Oh, no.
Do you think when a kid died, everything got thrown away with them so they couldn't be held responsible?
Quite to the contrary. I think a lot of that stuff they meant to cover up. But those are some of the things happening. And I think that a lot of people's eyes will be opened. And if they do this right, if they really are sincere about getting to the bottom of things. And what I fear is going to happen is what's happening now in terms of, you know, politicians trying to, you know, turn a blind eye to history and say, you know, what was in the past is in the past. So it doesn't have anything to do today. All you're trying to do is separate it. So I think that's they're going to try to do. But if you really do it in a way that it should be done.
Highlights historical trauma.
Well,
and the fact that
I sort of have issues with historical trauma, because it seems to me that it's labeling us with you know, being traumatized. Like I said, we're here.
It was traumatized.
Overcome all that.
Traumatized. Our parents were traumatized. Their parents were traumatized. Their parents were traumatized. We've been traumatized since 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
I want to recognize the resilience. But I think what's going to happen is that if Anti-Deb opens this up and it gets studied, a lot of people are going to be ashamed and want to turn a blind eye to this. So
you know what? My fear is no one will care. No one has really cared about anything for natives. If you look, do you see this story about the boarding schools on the major news sources? No, I read it on Facebook. do we think anybody really cares what happened to a bunch of little Native kids in America?
Well,
Especially not the people who are trying to rewrite history.
I think that's what we do in our little part of whoever listens to us, either on Facebook or on public access TV. I think that's what our role is here. Hopefully people will hear about this and want to know more and not try to sweep it aside. But I think our time's pretty close to being gone here, Kenny.
I will not be back next week, but I'm good for the week after.
All right, well, we'll be back in 2 weeks because Cindy has to
Work.
report into your probation officer down in Washington, D.C.
My grandsons are in Washington, D.C. right now.
Oh, yeah, right. You're going to go
They
down.
are.
Yeah. You got official business to take care of, don't you?
No, my grandsons went with their grandfather. He's taking them to show them Washington, D.C. I think it's
All right.
pretty cool.
All right, well, we'll see you in 2 weeks then, maybe.
Bye.